is the derivative here of y equals x times the square root of 1 minus x squared. So the first stage in the process is to just rewrite this for yourself. So it's going to be x times 1 minus x squared raised to the 1/2. And then you start differentiating. So y prime would be equal to the following. X is one function, 1 minus x squared to the 1/2 is another function, so you have to use the product rule and the chain rule here. So you can proceed as follows. Copy the x and then differentiate the 1 minus x squared to the 1/2 part. So bring the 1/2 down. Copy the inside in yellow there, 1 minus x squared. And then here it's going to be 1/2 minus 1. So that's going to be negative 1/2 as the new exponent. Then you multiply by the derivative of the inside. The derivative of 1 minus x squared is negative 2x. And then you add there as follows. The derivative of this x right here in front, that's 1. And then you copy that second part exactly as written for now. So 1 minus x squared raised to the 1/2. Then you take it from here. A lot of cleanup work, so y prime would be equal to the following. Write everything as just one fraction here for the first term. So it's going to be basically negative 2x squared. So there's an x over here, and there's a negative 2x over here. Multiply them to get negative 2x squared. On the bottom for now, you're going to have 2. And then that 1 minus x squared raised to the negative 1/2 will go to the bottom as the square root of 1 minus x squared, this way. So when you send it to the bottom, the 1/2 here, negative, becomes positive, and then you also write it in square root notation. For the second part, it's just going to look like this now, the square root basically, because it's here 1 times 1 minus x squared raised to the 1/2. So it's just the square root of 1 minus x squared. From here, it's standard often to write this as just one term and not, for example, two terms. So it's going to look like this basically at the next step. Take a look. It's going to be for now negative x squared, canceling off the 2's, and then here the square root of 1 minus x squared, and then here plus the square root of 1 minus x squared. From here, y prime will be equal to this next. So copy this part in other words, and then plus, put this root symbol down, and then you have to multiply this whole thing by this, 1 minus x squared over 1 minus x squared. The reason for this step is that, remember, this expression right here, this fraction, is just a form of the number 1, and it's going to give us the same bottoms. Continuing now, y prime would be equal to the following, essentially. Negative x squared. Bottom here is going to be this square root of 1 minus x squared. For the next one now is going to be this. This root of 1 minus x squared times this root of 1 minus x squared is just 1 minus x squared. And the reason as an example is something like this. When you have the square root of a times something like the square root of a, this is equivalent to the following, essentially. Keep that in mind. A raised to the 1/2 plus 1/2, which is a raised to the 1, which is just a. So in our case, a is 1 minus x squared, that's all. So that means over here now you're going to have the following, plus a new fraction that says 1 minus x squared, and in the bottom you're going to have the same bottom now. So it's going to be here 1 minus x squared. Continuing, y prime would be equal to the following. I combine the terms in the numerator because the bottoms are the same. So it's going to be negative x squared for now plus 1 minus x squared. And you put this over the same bottom because they're the same now. So 1 minus x squared. And lastly, to finish up, it's going to become y prime is equal to square root on the bottom here. This way, 1 minus x squared. And in the top, it's going to be negative x squared minus x squared, which is negative 2x squared. And then you copy the positive 1, and then this is the answer. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in another video. Please leave a like and subscribe.